Welcome to Live Reality Games podcast, where we talk about your favorite reality TV show competitions that are inspired by the reality TV shows. Thank you for listening to our Rent and Recap podcast by me and Connor, the no technical difficulty Connor. If you haven't liked, follow, subscribe our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube channel, please do so now. A little bit bending today, but I will try to be a little less, have a little less rent. So today we are here to talk about the Amazing Race season 33, episode 6 in Corsica, France. And Connor? So what do you think this episode overall?
I thought it was a good episode. It didn't feel as long as the last one. Last one felt very long and dragged out. This one has some suspense to it. I thought it was a good episode.
And I will tell you why we both felt the same way. So I'll tell you kind of my take on why it's more fast-paced episode. So first, we saw the teams departing from Switzerland, and for the first time ever, a charter plane. You can say the Amazing Race now is travel with style. So I don't really want to cramp into a commercial plane with strangers, and now they just basically have their own planes. What do you think about that, Connor?
I was a bit confused at first because I was like thinking to myself, is this the travel time? Like, is this? I thought they're departing separately, but then I realized they all traveled the same, so it made sense in the end.
Just try to reduce the echoing. So, yeah, I believe this is the first time the Amazing Race has visited Corsica. Of course, if anybody who knows that they have visited before, please correct me. Well, it is great that the show finally visited a part of France that's not a typical tourist destination. I think the show should do more of this kind of destination locations like for us, we won't be inspired to go unless we see it on the show, right? So now I want to go there because of the Amazing Race. So have you ever think about like the France that you see on a lot of TV shows or tourism video? Do you ever see this kind of France before?
Not necessarily. No, I thought it was very beautiful. I thought it was very looked amazing. So, this is not the France I'm really used to. I think on especially like scripted TV shows, especially you're used to a like stereotypical version of things, and so this was like the real deal. And I really enjoyed the my eyes really enjoyed it. So
That's good. So, and teams departing from the pit start, quotation pit start, in Atiani. And I believe this is the first time the word pit start is officially used in the show. It doesn't really sound quite good or quite right to me. What do you think of the word pit start?
are we even classifying it as a word?
I don't know. Well, anything. If you put everything on TV, it can make it to something, right? So
True. I don't like it. It doesn't have a ring to it. There's no ring to it. Maybe if I hear it more, it'll eventually have a ring, but there's no ring to it right now. So I'm not a fan.
yeah. So if any of you can think of a better word to use for the Amazing Race in the future season, please comment below or tell us. Or, of course, for our regular blogger who actually mentioned to you about 24 recap show, you can also pipe in for the TR story, of course. He must have a lot of things to say about the poor piss start. So teams once again, of course, departing in 15-minute interval, where first group includes Dusty and Ryan, and also Lulu and Lala. And then second group has Kim and Pan and Akbar and Sherry. And last but not least, we have the Arun and Natalia departing 30 minutes from the first group. And of course, as I predicted in the last podcast episode, there was no speed bump for Arun and Natalia. So, what do you think about this change?
Was there no shown speed bump? Because they didn't show one, but was there none in general? There was just no speed bump.
Well, this is the thing, right? We as speculation were there. I mean, when they restart the race, I mean, in Switzerland, even though there was a speed bump for the two returning eliminated teams, the show decided not to air it because I don't, for whatever reason. Personally, I think it's because there were no more speed bump for the teams for the rest of the season that survived again non-elimination leg. Okay, fine. Let's double this time around. So I think it's logistically as good for the race, the season itself to basically not showing that because I don't think there's any speed bump anymore. But with that change, do you think it's a better change or not so good of a change for this season or even for the future season of the Amazing Race if they eliminated speed bump because of the 15-minute integral departure time?
I mean, to your point, they did do something to make them 30 minutes behind the first team. There's that.
Mhm.
So I would rather
I
them
mean,
just all depart like normally and then still do a speed bump because you're still behind. That's not enough for me because when you are starting in last place in the next leg, you're already still behind, right? You're already still
mhm,
behind.
mhm.
So, and sometimes it's even more than 30 minutes, and they still have to do a speed bump. So, like, if that's the rules of the race, why are we changing it? That's just me.
Well, so then if any of the teams that's actually racing and do their podcast, maybe hopefully one of you can actually answer that question for us. Personally, I think in the past season of the Amazing Race, when it comes to speed bump, they can usually finish in about 10 to 15 minutes. So the 15-minute integral basically is making up the teams that are not able to depart the ice in with the prior group. So 15-minute delay is equivalent to a speed bump time. However, it seems like a cheap cop out, which unfortunately Connor again has a
No, I'm here. I'm here. I'm here.
still here? Okay, so
I'm
just make
here.
sure you're still alive and well, which you are,
No, no,
but
I'm
he just
here.
want to show his face.
I have to my just a second.
Okay, so in the meantime, when Connor tried to adjust his technical difficulty finally, oh, he's back again.
We're good.
It's a 30-second technical difficulty.
I was teasing.
Then, yeah, so then we're starting to talk about so when this leg started, teams hop on a vehicle driven by a local wearing a mask due to the dangerous terrain for safety reasons. That's apparently being basically confirmed by the teams. Which when we see on the episode, it's also a lot of mountains, a lot of terrains to have to drive through. It is going to be difficult for even for locals, I believe. So talking about safety measures, teams were advised that they would do more self-driving, but we understand that in the special circumstances, it's better to have a designated driver. So what do you think about in this? Like there is no self-driving at all.
you know, I don't mind it because usually there is usually they're doing taxis, they're doing self drivers. Like this isn't like that big of a change to me. It's not really much of a change, you know. So
Mhm.
I don't mind it. I think it's and they're not making them drive stick, which was your big concern. So like I think it's fine.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Personally, as a producer, I don't want to put teams in dangerous situation. Yeah. So, well, I don't pay them $1 million at the end,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But uh, but I have a little bit concern. Like I always said during the podcast, I said basically how the Amazing Race is marketing their season every year. Like this season, they keep saying that we have the COVID safety measure to for the teams to return, and they're not going to be. They're doing mostly self driving. So, but in the end of it, this episode have no self driving at all. At all. So I kind of feel like it was very inconsistent and nowhere to be seen like with their safety measure. I really don't like when they use like it's not like okay, I'll do it in one episode so I can use this as a marketing ploy, right? So yeah, that's a little bit not okay for me, but I know for any show they have to do whatever they can to drum up all the attention if they want to.
Mhm.
Oh well, let's not talk about that because at this point right now, we don't really feel like the show is produced in the pandemic season anymore. I
Yeah.
mean, it just feels like a regular season. So we're not going to judge the show by oh, it's because of pandemic we should have a lower expectation. No, we should always have a high expectation of the show.
Because the show has shown they can deliver on a high expectation, which is why you have the high expectation. If the show wasn't as good as it is, you wouldn't
Mhm.
have that high expectation. So
Yeah, I have a lot of other things to talk about, so we'll move on to that. Okay, so then teams got to Belvedere de Cortez, and the teams need to choose between a detour between say cheese or mule, please. So I know a lot of podcasters out there, which I listened to prior to our show podcast, to gain some knowledge and perspective, like from Nerdtainment and the Holders family, which there's two podcasts I like to listen to. Some viewers may have issues with the two detour options being too close to each other and should be like in a different parts of the town. I personally don't find any issue with it as long as it's not the same thing. It's not something too cheesy, pun intended in this case, or too manufactured by the production team. Like doing something which I remember in the season 31 where the teams have to dress in dinosaur and look for five eggs. That just seems not something like a local Dubai person would ever do, right? So, so what do you think of the detour being very close to one another?
I'm fine with it because to me it adds suspense in the sense that, you know, a lot of times there's that mystery of it when the detours are so far apart from each other. A team's like, oh, are we behind? Are we ahead? I don't know. You know, whereas
Yeah.
when they're so close to each other, you can sense, you get that suspense of Ryan and Dusty falling behind you, the other team's input on why they're falling behind and how big of a deal it is. It's, you know, it's a nice change a little bit from what we're used to, but I see no problem with it because it does add suspense in its own way, and it does allow teams to talk about other teams and be like, oh, we're ahead of them or we're behind them. You know what I mean? So I'm fine with it, as opposed to the mystery of are we ahead, are we behind?
True. And what would you choose in this detour?
Um, by if I was doing it, just reading the clue as the other teams, as all the teams do, I would have done the cheese one. But looking at it from the perspective of the audience member,
Mm-hmm.
I would do the mule one.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I thought with the mule one there'd be way more animal element
Mm-hmm.
involved of the mule, like, you know, just based on the clue, like like a lot more traveling with the mule, and maybe the mule wouldn't be happy. Like, you know, we've seen that countless times on the Amazing Race.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, it seemed like watching it was like, oh, you just take the mule a few steps and it's done. It was more about harnessing the mule than anything else. And so I would have done the mule one as an audience member, but if I was reading the clue, I'm doing the cheese one.
Yeah, I think the first time ever the Amazing Race involved something with the mule. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I think it's back in season 7, episode 1. But don't worry, we know somebody will correct me at the end of it, so we're not going to go into that. But so I think, as you say earlier, yes, the Amazing Race right now is kind of lack of a mental drama. In this case, if the detour are very close, so it kind of spooked the team. Like Dusty and Ryan was really concerned when the teams are passing them, so that kind of creates some drama, which is good to see. Rather than if the detour is far apart, you don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think all the detours now come with a very clear instruction, of course, and it really comes down to the understanding and executing skill. Like you said, if you were actually the audience, you would choose one, but if you're the one doing it, reading the instruction, you would choose another. And I think in the older seasons, I don't think the instruction were very detailed, and the teams need to figure it out on their own. Not saying that things were easier for teams now, but it is definitely become a little bit predictable for the show when teams are not there trying to frantically figure it out by themselves, like the how to perform a task or how to build anything without any like detailed instruction. Kind of feel like the teams back then. Sorry, kind of feel like teams back then were more like jack of all trades. But why Jack anyway? I don't know. But
Yeah.
but what do you think about the clear instruction? Basically, it feels like they are reading every single thing. They just have to follow that step by step.
Yeah. So, what was the question again? I was doing the research on the
Yeah,
mule.
so
I
it's
was
just
looking
like
at the mule.
I think the instruction of all tasks right now are very detail oriented and very
Yeah.
clear. So as long as you are a good reader and good follower of the instruction, it seems like it makes things simple. If you
Yeah.
can't read, then of course, then you have trouble performing a challenge.
Mm. So, to answer your question, I like the detail-oriented tasks. It's like I don't have a problem with the tasks. I have a problem when all the tasks are the same.
Oh, do you feel that way? Okay. Yeah.
We're having a lot of detail-oriented tasks this season, which is fine, but it almost gets repetitive almost. And I was looking it up to answer your question. We have had a task with a donkey before. I don't know if donkeys and mules, would you consider them the same?
I
But
can't tell the difference.
yeah, they're close. They're close.
Yes. Well, so then, of course, in this sense, after the detour, well, then teams went to a canyon in Altipiani for a splashy roadblock. So it was a very watery obstacle course that teams need to go through and find a clue. It seems like a fun tourist attraction for people who likes adventure. Do you feel that way too?
It seemed like a lot of fun. Like it definitely seemed physical. It definitely seemed hard and difficult, but it also seemed like a lot of fun as well. And I liked on paper the element of like,
Mhm.
oh, you could miss the clue, but no one seemed to miss the clue. I wish they would have hidden the clue a little bit harder, maybe make the clue a little harder to find. Have the element of someone having to go all the way back and do it again.
Mhm.
But I thought it was a fun task.
Well, if I were being a very cheapskate, I'll tell you that. Well, each time costs a certain amount of money. So if you go back to do it again, the
Yeah.
production team will pay another another tour. No, that was just me joking.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's just a way to show the experience, not necessarily try to hinder the teams and try to miss the clue. I think a lot of past season, I think the production team tried to make that happen for the teams. But in the more recent season, I think the production team just say, just do it, show it, and then get it over with. That's something I don't like. I like the old season where they try to trick the teams as much as they can. But nowadays, I think in order to save time, in order to reduce production costs, of course, it's better to just do it in a more easier way of doing it. Put the clue in the most obvious location. But personally, I like to do the roadblock. It seems very fun. And if there's something like that in Vancouver, I'll definitely have the teams in the Amazing Hunt to do it for sure. Of course, after that, the teams need to go to a river. I think it's called the Tavernia, to inflate a raft and paddle themselves upstream to a pit stop in Cardicea Dam. And some funny moments were exchanged between Raquel and Kayla and Dusty and Ryan. So, what do you think when you see the teams interacting, try to rip up their life jacket and
I
show off
like,
emotion?
yeah. Oh, sorry. But to answer your question, I like the banter. I like the banter between teams because you can tell it's competitive, but it's also friendly. There's no like cheap shots. There's no like rudeness like you've seen in past seasons.
Mhm.
It's friendly, but it's also competitive. It's banter, and that's what we love to see. And we don't like it getting too personal.
Is that the only thing that you notice?
Oh, like what do you mean?
Okay, I'm just going. I'm being cheesy here. You know the fact that I think Dusty and Ryan was trying to show off their muscle. That's what
Yeah.
Raquel and Kayla was saying, and also the pissed off greeter were like this all the time, and it feels keeping a straight face, right? Like if as I think as a host he have go through a lot of things, so it's hard being professional. Of course, you can't really show a lot of things on his emotion, right? But I don't know why they were trying to amp up the fact that they were trying to show off their muscle. If they do, they should have a better camera angle, which we don't see a lot of them, unfortunately. It's all
Well,
for the female viewers and people who like Dusty and Ryan out there. But unfortunately, the camera work was a little bit poor that in the way to show their muscle anyway.
and they
So
were pumped up as well. They were like they came from behind. They were behind pretty much the whole leg. They come back in the roadblock.
yeah,
It's a big moment. They're like pumped up, and it's I guess it's a normal thing when you're pumped up just to come out of your clothes, I guess, and just whoa, you know what I mean? So
well, technically, they did have about, I would say the paddling was about 10 to 15 minutes. So they could actually work their muscle and before they check into the pit stop. So then their muscle was so like jacked at that moment, right? So just like going to the gym. So good for the viewers. Overall, I really like this episode a lot. The tasks were great. And like you mentioned earlier, it's actually a better pacing because there were three challenges. There's a detour, the roadblock, and the paddling up to the pit stop. It's a pretty good number for three challenges per episode. I think it reminds me of the Amazing Race Canada season 6 episode 1, where there was a daring roadblock, not so much like bungee jumping, but basically jumping from a high point to a net, if I remember correctly. And then there's also a searching challenge, what also involves paddling. and another endurance roadblock where they have to climb a very high pole to the top of Point Retriever Cliff coming down. So it does have a lot of things to fill into an episode when you have three things to do, rather than the last episode we think there's only two things: a detour roadblock, and that was it.
Agreed, and it didn't feel as long. There was more jam packed. You were more invested. If there was suspense too, because everyone was like, "Is this going to be the end of Ryan and Dusty? Is this the end?" You know, there was suspense.
Mhm.
There was excitement. We almost had a really intense kayak canoe race
Yeah.
at the end,
Mhm.
inflatable, kayak. So,
I'm
it was a good episode.
I am just a little shocked that they actually don't have any footage to show when the teams are actually kayaking. It's not really that much. I know they use drone during some episodes to show some footage, right? But I'm just surprised they didn't actually have a drone while in the paddling area. I'm not sure if there's any restriction in France about not being able to use drone, or they just didn't think about it. Yeah.
And
So yeah.
I was gonna ask, what did you think of? They didn't have like a drone to show everything and who was catching up to who, but they did have at one point with the roadblock with the they had that little chart up where you could see that Dusty was coming closer to Akbar and past of Akbar. What did you think of that little chart where it was like the visual perspective on like dots on a board and this person's getting closer? What did you think of that?
Personally, I still prefer the live action rather than the computer graphic stuff, right? So, but I know sometimes teams, the production team won't be able to catch everything, so they have to use that to kind of supplement the missing footage, right? Which I do sometimes too, if I don't have any footage, right? So yeah, but like I said, there's a lot of things in which they can use drone, which I've seen it in past episodes, but I'm just sure why they didn't use in this episode. Like you said, the point where when Ryan passing Akbar, right? That's Ryan, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
we saw the pass, but when he was catching up to Akbar, we didn't see like there wasn't like a we just kind of like got a map visual of he's catching up, and then we saw the pass. I was you know what I mean. So
yeah. Well, we'll see if the next episode will have more of a drone footage, right? So we'll see that. And the end of it, even though I liked the episode, but I think in a sense of it, even like you said, even though there was some drama between Dusty and Ryan catching up or falling behind, I still find the episode a little bit too predictable because it's not reinventing itself with some new twists and turns. Like in the past season, when there's airport drama, and on the current season, of course, because a charter plane, or for safety reason of traveling, or because the airport situation where, for whatever reason, the airport drama was taken away, like a lot of viewers has mentioned. And when you kind of arriving at the same, like when you're departing the airport at the same time, and it's kind of taking away a lot of drama for one, and because kind of my mind's kind of stuck here right now. But so when the teams have to book their ticket or whatsoever, there was a lot of mental exhaustion to find the better ticket and to be able to cut in front of the line and to put on their wait list. There's a lot of mental capacity or exhaustion when you do all those, right? And so the recent season has become a sense of it only focused on the physical exhaustion part of it. Do you feel that way as well, or?
I would agree with that.
Okay. So with the typical detour and roadblock design, it is hard for teams to pass another team if all the teams have done things correctly. And if there's no navigation need to be made, like this episode, right? And so that means there's no navigational mistakes. Like the last episode where Arun and Natalia was like over 2.5 hours behind. All the teams will possibly end up in the same position from the beginning to the end. It will all come down to physical capability. So in this case, why Dustin and Ryan is actually dominating this season so far, because if there is no mental challenge, we haven't seen anything so far except the first episode where they have to put a puzzle together. Everything else is pretty much if I can do it, it's good, and if I can muster my strength through it, I'll be good too. Yeah, so it's kind of lacking the mental side of it.
A little bit.
Yeah. And one thing I think I heard other podcasts mention the Holderness family. They were mentioning that they were when the start of the sixth leg of the race, they were expecting a U turn, right? It's being like almost like half a season in, right? And then they were saying in their podcast that if there was a U turn, they're not going to use it. They will only use it if they were like very behind, right? And in this episode where since the detour are very close, it's actually the best time for the production team to actually put in a U-turn.
Yeah.
But they didn't do it.
Mm.
So for me, it feels like it's a lost opportunity to create some drama, which the show is kind of severely lack of.
Mhm. Yeah, could you imagine the drama of Ryan and Dusty going from the cheese one, quitting that one, going to the meal one, and then completing the meal one, and realizing they have to go back and do the cheese one?
Yeah,
Could you
yeah.
imagine the
I
drama
mean,
of that?
yeah, but that's the fun part of
Yeah,
watching the
that's what
Amazing
I'm saying.
Race, right? Yeah. So, but I think it's a huge opportunity wasted. Well, we'll see what if there is any U-turn seriously in this season at all.
Mm.
So, despite all my rant, I think it's a great episode. But it's also actually a stable, like what I say stable, it's more like a what do I mean by that? Let me think about that. This episode is actually a formula for the future season of the Amazing Race, where it has charter flight, self-driving, or local hire driving, and three challenges. So with all this, it's a good episode overall, but it feels like it just feels still something's missing, right? Like I said earlier, there's no mental challenge in any aspect of it. So I think based on what we've seen so far, I mean, or what we've seen in the recent season, of course, it definitely needs some restructure within some new racing element.
Mhm.
Like the Amazing Hunt, like for me, we always try to come up with new elements to show, and then we try to outsmart team as much as possible. Right? So and to do some self promotion, yeah, it's airing this Saturday at 5 p.m. Pacific, right? So no problem. So as super fans, we do want the Amazing Race to bring back some jaw dropping moments, and not just because the beautiful, not just jaw dropping at the beautiful scenery, but also the drama as well. Like we see Dustin and Ryan basically like switching detour at the last minute of it. They'd be like, really? Okay. So, and then would you ever do that as a racer yourself? Would you ever do that kind of choice decision just to changing detours at the last minute of it?
I mean, there's definitely pros to changing detours. I mean, you saw Ryan and Dusty as soon as they got there, they wanted to trade. Dusty was like, "No, we got to trade, we got to trade, we got to trade." So,
Mhm.
they were very quick to want to try and trade. Eventually, they decided not to, and then eventually they decided to actually trade. I definitely think there's advantages to changing detours, but I feel like it's worth it to try it longer than a few seconds. Get an idea of like what it is, see if you can actually do it, and then decide, okay, do I need to trade or not? There's always advantages to changing detours, but there's always potential risk of going home as well. I think it just depends on the situation. You have to pick it wisely. And
So,
especially if,
yeah.
like what we're saying, the detours were so close to each other, it's not hard to go and just do the mule one. It's right there. It's much
Mhm.
bigger risk to do the other detour when they're miles and miles apart.
True. Yeah. So the changing itself is easier, but so like going back to the detour distance, I like it closer. So it kind of makes teams more like a wishy-washy, creates a more wishy-washy situation where they can change their minds constantly. If one thing doesn't go good, they just go jump to another. I think this, I think this actually helps production costs if they're closer. Maybe the Amazing Race can consider that in the future. And I think one of the reason why Dusty was cast for this, I think you have to have somebody who has some sort of short fuse or impatient. I think Dusty or more like that. And even in other podcasts, they were mentioned that Dusty was just having like a mental breakdown at that moment of it. But that's the fun part we like to see when the team is more like they are having some situation going on. If everybody can do everything, there's no fun of watching, right? So, so I think sometimes even when the podcast that the Dusty and Kayla was doing, they were saying that they were the one that being chosen by their teammate. So where they were not cast by the production team, right? So they feel like the normal people because they don't have a special story like Ryan did, or Raquel was cast by the Amazing Race apparently, and then Kayla was the one that being chosen by Raquel. So sometimes even when I was choosing the castings in the casting situation, I would prefer that somebody would definitely have some bigger personality and easier to have a meltdown, and just as long as they don't cause production some problem, and I'm happy with that because it creates more drama,
Mm.
so to speak, and we use more footage of theirs. Otherwise, it becomes, yeah, I can do it, and then or they can just what do you call it? Out of words at this point. See, I create drama for myself. Sometimes I just forget about what words to use. But if it's too easy for people, it's not fun to watch. That's the main gist of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, agreed.
So then we usually talk about the episode itself, but what's even more interesting is actually the preview for the next episode. So we actually finally seeing some jaw-dropping moments for a eating challenge. What do you think about that? About that eating challenge that's showing for the next episode?
I'm very excited for an eating challenge. We haven't had an eating challenge in a very long time,
Hmm.
and it's not, at least it's not very common. And I'm very excited for it. And I have to wonder, like, you know, it's interesting that we're getting an eating challenge under these circumstances. I wonder what about these circumstances bring out an eating challenge.
I can tell you that because I actually Google and go to Wikipedia before all this. So apparently, it is actually a local delicacy called kasu marzu. It is actually outlawed in Europe due to the health reason. Because apparently, you've seen the preview where there's some maggots in the cheese, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what what's the health concerns that because our stomach acid may not be able to kill all the maggots in there once we digest it, so it may create some condition if you have actually live maggots inside you,
Yeah.
right? So even though it's a local delicacy that being sold on the black market for double the price, but it is something that it's actually very popular.
Mm,
I'm kind of afraid that if the Amazing Race decide to show this in the next episode, and that it will probably be the last time you see that on the national television.
maybe.
Yeah. Well, at least I do my homework before all this, but I'm definitely looking forward to see the teams eating those maggot cheese. So for us, like we also like for the Amazing Hunt where we do this season of the in the city expedition where we feature all the sweets. Like we always choose more all the healthy products. The only thing we do differently is that we try to have the teams overindulging it. Once again, it's this Saturday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Go watch it. It will be actually available on Live Reality Game Community Facebook. And talking about the eating challenge, back to the cheese. Do you think that should actually be put into the Survivor 42 eating challenge rather than the typical, they're eating cow intestine or whatever the Survivor people are eating? Do you think they should actually bring that to Survivor?
Um, no, because Survivor would just make them eat straight maggots. They wouldn't make them eat maggot cheese. They'd make them eat straight maggots. They
True.
wouldn't. They wouldn't make it easy and make it cheese. You know what I mean?
Survivor people have it tough when it comes to food challenge, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see how the teams are doing for the next week. So let me see. What else do you think about? Any last thing to say about this episode?
Um, I think the season is doing really well. I'm very happy as a viewer. I think it's a good season. And the episode as a whole, I was enjoyed with. So
Mhm. So assuming the next episode they're still in France, and we'll see how where teams are going. I think I really like how they featured this island, which they never did. and it's something that we probably never see even in our daily travel. We will never thought of going to that location, but now I think after the pandemic is over, I think a lot of people would like to go there and try to eat the mac and cheese if possible.
Maybe. Maybe.
Okay, so that will be it for today. It's a shorter one, but don't forget to come back for more rants and recap from the Live Reality Games Community Podcast about the Amazing Race Season 33. And please like, follow, subscribe Live Reality Games Community Facebook page, Twitter, and YouTube channel. Thank you for all the listeners out there to hear our rant and recap. Connor and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.